Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. We are going to look at ISO 22000, the 2018 transition this afternoon. Just a couple of housekeeping before we start. I am working from home, so I apologise if children walk in the door or things like that. I've tried to tell them, but you guarantee someone will come home in the middle of a webinar. Or if the dog starts barking, I'll try and mute. If you have any questions, I love questions. Please put them in the chat box or the question box for me, and I'll pick them up at the end. So let's make a start. So NQA, who are we? So we are a global certification body. We predominantly in the UK, if you're joining us from the UK, the majority of our work is sort of ISO 9001, 14001, 45001. Also probably one of the biggest 27001, which is information security in the UK. In China, we're the biggest automotive certification body, and in the US, also aerospace. So we get involved in lots of things, and for food safety certification, we look after it all from the UK. So we deal with all of our agents and offices around the world, and we do all the certification for them in the UK. Just a little bit of who we are. We also offer training courses. At the end of my presentation, I've got a slide to tell you about our food safety courses. We have a new agreement with a company to offer food safety courses in the UK, which is really exciting. But in the UK also, we have our own training courses for quality environment, energy management, medical devices, etc. So feel free to have a look on our website for those. Oh, that's an awful picture. So this is who I am. So I am the food certification manager for NQA. Our accredited food safety schemes are ISO 22000 and FSSC 22000. We also do HACCP and GMP, and a couple of other little unaccredited schemes as well. I've been working in the certification industry, specialising in food safety for over 15 years. And it's my job here at NQA to oversee all of our food safety certification standards globally for NQA from the UK, cascading technical knowledge to auditors, training auditors, approving auditors, and also I try and share some information with the industry where I can. So the webinar today is going to be about 45 minutes. As I said before, please feel free to ask me questions in either the chat box or the question box. And towards the end of probably tomorrow onwards, the recording of the webinar will be circulated. So you can use it to, colleagues and things, good training exercise. So you will receive an overview of ISO 22000 today. I'm going to try and give you some tips and techniques to manage the requirements of the standard and also drive continual improvement. I will offer some interpretation of the new or updated clauses. We'll talk about how to transition from ISO 22000, 2005 to 2018. And I'll share some common queries and issues that come up when we're auditing ISO 22000 or from queries that I've had from clients who are implementing the standard. So ISO 22000 was initially published in 2005. It was in response to a number of food crises such as mad cow disease, the adulteration of wine. There was some of milk, baby milk, etc. So the aim was to have a globalization of food safety chains enabled. Oh, sorry, it was also in response to the globalization of the issue that we had a few years ago of the origin of where products come from. And also the need from the industry itself for them to be able to demonstrate that they are operating in accordance to the applicable laws and requirements specified in Codex Alimentarius. And the biggest thing really to facilitate the harmonisation of international food safety regulations. So ISO standards are typically reviewed every 3 to 5 years. So the update from 2005 to 2018 was well overdue and you know, hugely welcomed in the industry. The update and revision is by a technical committee. So they started meeting in 2014, and so I can't get my glasses on. And so they've been meeting regularly since 2014, and then the standard was first published in June 2018. One of the biggest changes I found, which is you know, a really good thing, is that the adoption of Annex SL. I will speak about Annex SL, I think, on the next slide, but it allows the standard to be integrated very easily with other ISO standards which follow the same layout. So the deadline to transition to 2018 was originally June 2021, which is 3 years after its release date. It's been extended until 31st of December this year due to COVID. So lots of people have delayed their transition who originally they planned to do it last year, and now they're doing it this year, which is why we're still having the webinars and talking to everybody about it, because there are still a good number of organisations out there that have not transitioned, but time's running out. So Annex SL is a high-level structure, and it consists of 10 core clauses. So this will be the same for any standard that follows Annex SL or has adopted Annex SL. It allows the standards to be aligned. So the requirements tend to start from Section 4. Section 4 is your context of organisation. That's the same for all Annex L standards. 5 leadership, 6 planning, 7 support, 8 operation, 9 performance evaluation, and 10 improvement. The biggest difference you'll find is when you're looking at the other standards. If you understand one, you can pretty much pick up another standard and you can interpret what it is that the requirements are wanting. The biggest difference between sort of quality management system and food safety management system is things like it's not a quality policy, it's a food safety policy, etc. And most of the sort of HACCP requirements are under Section 8. So it fits with food safety, but alongside the other standards as well. One of the other things that has been incorporated or adopted in the new standard is the concept of Plan, Do, Check, Act. And there's lovely diagram here of how the standards and processes for food safety fit into Plan, Do, Check, Act. So your first, so your sort of context of organisation, leadership, planning, support, all come under plan. So, what what are you going to do? And operation section number 8, what are you actually going to do? And you actually do it. And then you check it. That's your performance evaluation, and things like internal audits, test results, management review come under check. And then number 10, improvement, you're going to act. So it's all under Plan, Do, Check, Act. The structural changes of the standard, it's most of the requirements are still in the new version of the standard. There are extra requirements, but they're under different wording or different sections of the standard. So in 2005 version, we had interactive communication. Obviously, that's been expanded as the world moves round, communication changes. System management, prerequisite programs, they're all still there, and your HACCP principles are still there. So we keep those, but additional to that is more customer focus, more leadership, and within leadership, we're also talking about food safety culture, the engagement of people, which again that engagement of people could be referred to in leadership or support, the training and approval, but also for food safety culture as well. More of a process approach. It's not ISO 22000, it's not a tick box exercise, it's a process approach. So what do you need to do to get your intended output? Big emphasis on improvement with everything we do. There's no reason why we can't look at improving it. Evidence-based decision making, so risk-based thinking, is a big part of ISO 22000. The way I describe that to people is more, how often do you think you need to do it? Not you do it monthly because someone told you that you had to do it monthly. If you monitor something every week and you might have an issue probably once a year, then do you need to monitor it every week? Or, is there evidence to suggest that you could do it less frequently, or evidence to suggest you need to do it more frequently? And relationship management. So process-based thinking, in line with your risk-based thinking, it's really understanding. So you can't work through the standard in clause order. It's more look at the process from start to finish, and then you fit the clauses within that process. It's a cycle. So for example, if I was looking at leadership, I can't just say, tell me about your leadership, what have you got in place, how do you include your employees, and filter down the importance of food safety. It's a wider picture, so you've got to go through the whole process to actually understand if leadership is the leadership commitment is adequate. The other part that we should mention here is where processes are outsourced, to understand how that is integrated into the business, how it's managed, and how the effectiveness is monitored. Also looking at who's accountable for that process. So, for example, you might be making cheese, and the milk might come from your dairy down the road, comes to the cheese processing plant. It then might go off to somewhere else to be smoked. So that process is outsourced. So you contract somebody to do the smoking of your cheese, and then it comes back to you, possibly for packaging and dispatch to its final destination. So in the smoking process, you know, how is that contract managed? How is it monitored? And who's accountable for the process or the product while it's going through that process? So then once we've gone through the whole process or the process flow for the product, management review is the opportunity to review the performance of the food safety management system. You can make objectives, you can see if any changes need to be made, and start the process all over again. You know, what have we found from our findings? What have the internal audits found? What have all of the monitoring of all of our suppliers, you know, where are the trends, what do we need to do to move forward? So I've touched on this slightly earlier, but risk-based thinking. So the best way to consider frequency of an activity is to look at the risks involved in the process, and also look at the trends from the data that you have. So things to consider. So a process that's high risk, it might be high risk because it has a huge potential to go wrong, or because the consequences would be very severe. Then obviously you're going to want to monitor or conduct, audit that process more frequently than if it was a low risk process. How you assess the risk is up to you. You need to be able to demonstrate how you've assessed what risk rating it is and the frequency that you've determined. One of the most important things about ISO 22000 for me, which makes this a great standard to implement globally, is that it doesn't dictate to you a particular method of risk assessment or risk management. It looks at the concept of your risk management from an organizational level and from an operational level. But how you assess risk is entirely up to you. You need to obviously be comfortable in how you're looking at that, how you're determining that. And us as a certification body, or from an auditor point of view, we need to be comfortable that you've addressed it correctly. One of the things to remember is the standard does require you to retain the method that you've used as documented information when you've conducted your risk assessments. So just going all the way back to the beginning of the standard, I always say to people, have you read the definition section? People often don't read the definition section of the standard because it comes before the requirements. But there's been some changes with the 2018 standard, namely the definition of a significant food safety hazard, control measures, action criterion, competence, interested party, outsource and risk. And there's been some changes to the definition of CCP and also OPRP, also monitoring and validation and verification. So the definition section of the standard, everyone thinks, I know what that means. I know what an interested party is. But if you're implementing the standard, read the definition, because what you think is an interested party might not necessarily be what your understanding is. It's only a few pages, so read it. So as I mentioned before, so from section 4 to 10 are the requirements of the standard, and that's a nice little diagram of the clauses, how they flow. So as with previous versions of the standard, the word shall indicates that it is a mandatory requirement, so you will do something. And when you're being audited, these are the things where the standard says you shall do something. They're the things that we're really going to be checking on, or we're going to be focusing on. So let's delve a little bit into the standard requirements and the new requirements that came in with Annex SL and the 2018 version of the standard. So context of the organisation, what that really means is, do you and can we really understand what your organisation does, what its purpose is? And in order to do that, the standard asks us to identify internal and external issues. So it's only part of context of the organisation. I've put some examples of internal and external issues here. Some of them you might think, oh, I didn't think of that. This is my interpretation, and I would expect you to consider internal and external issues as it's on the screen at the moment. One of the things that we've seen quite a lot of at the moment, it could be changes in consumption patterns. So we've seen throughout the last 18 months with the pandemic, some organisations, particularly sort of catering organisations, the consumption patterns for them have gone way down low because they've been closed for numbers of months, etc., or they might have been open, but for example, people that make school meals, the schools were closed, so that's a massive change in consumption, but they were still being operating because schools were still open in some capacity, but obviously at a much smaller scale. In comparison to some organisations where their consumption patterns have skyrocketed, and they've had to make changes to their processes to accommodate, a much higher output of products. They're all issues that we need to review and that will affect your food safety management system. On the flip side of that, so working conditions, the social distancing rules, rules for wearing masks and things, how has that affected your food safety management system? Because I'm pretty sure it would have affected things in one way or another. For example, if I have a mask on, I don't seem to be able to see anything going on below me. So if I'm walking up or down the stairs, I can't see the stairs. If someone's wearing a mask and working on a machine or conveyor going past them, Can they see properly? You know, what's the risk to your food safety management system? You might have previously had people standing, you know, a foot apart from each other. They might have had to be working 2 meters apart. You know, how is that affecting your process? You need to be, you know, aware of that it can affect things. So understanding the needs of interested parties. I like this one because quite often we see people's matrices of, you know, who are your interested parties, and they say, you know, it's our customers, it's our staff, it's our suppliers, or yeah, suppliers, customers, staff. What about your landlord? What about the local authority? What about the factory next door? They're interested in what you're doing because they would need to know if it's going to affect what they're doing, and vice versa. Regulators, so certification body, for example, pretty much most food safety standards and contracts for food safety certification will include the need to communicate with your certification body if anything's changed in your business that will affect the food safety management system. So, you know, people were not very good at letting people know that the technical managers left and they've been replaced, because, you know, why would we need to let the certification body know we've replaced the technical manager? That's a change to your food safety management system, and you need to communicate that to us. So yeah, think about who are your interested parties. They might not necessarily be customers, and your staff and your suppliers. Think bigger. So the scope of your food safety management system, it's not new, but there's been more definition in the standard. Anything that will affect the food safety of your product, characteristics such as type of packaging used, the type of storage, shelf life conditions, need to be included in the scope of your management system. And I've put an example there: the fermentation, carbonation and packing of red wine into glass bottles. Obviously, if the scope was just red wine, what are you doing with red wine? Are you making it? Are you buying it in, you know, the huge bags from Australia and just decanting it, putting it into bottles? Are you actually making it? Are you further processing from another product? Be specific. You know, fermentation, carbonation, that all affects the finished product, and the fact that it's into glass bottles, you know, that's obviously shelf life, that affects the storage of the product. So be specific. So leadership, so this is quite new in the 2018 version. It's been expanded on. So we already included things like that, you know, you had to establish a food safety policy and people had to be responsible. But what we're really now asking is, are top management engaged in the implementation or supporting the food safety management system? So who is top management? So according to ISO 22000, top management is the person or group of people who direct or control an organization at the highest level. And an external auditor will expect to speak to those people. At the end of the day, if there's a food safety issue, who is responsible? If that person responsible has no involvement in the running or the implementation of your food safety management system, there could be problems. And it's also not fair to, you know, we'll run your business, but you give us the funding or whatever, and you can be ultimately responsible, because that person's not going to want to be ultimately responsible for somebody else who could possibly make a product that, if there's a food safety recall or you know, a major food safety issue, they're responsible, not the people necessarily that are, not the technical manager, not the quality manager, not the person working on line one, who's actually responsible. So we're looking at, are they engaged, and are they aware of the business processes? So looking at planning now, so this is one of the key clauses in the standard. It sets out the framework and asks you to plan what it is you're actually going to be doing. And there's some actions here on the left-hand side. So what are we trying to achieve? What could stop us from achieving our objectives? How will we address those issues? Can risks be turned into opportunities? So what are the risks and opportunities of what you're doing? Can the opportunities help you to improve? Who's responsible for any actions that come out of any of these opportunities or objectives that you set? Put some time scales on it. So when will you need to take action? And how will you know, how will you monitor whether the actions were effective? And then you go all the way back again and start all over again. So just a couple of pointers here. So risks not only involve food safety, but also risks that can impact your food safety management system, maybe losing productivity or effectiveness. ISO 22000 differentiates between different types of risks. So it could be a commercial risk, it could be a political risk, it could be a cultural risk, etc. But what are those risks, and are they risks, are they opportunities, are they both? What are you going to do about them? How can you use those risks to improve your business? So just a note there, I've added on there that the COVID pandemic, we couldn't, you know, up until sort of probably February, March last year, I wouldn't have expected to see it on people's risk and opportunity matrices or meeting minutes, etc. But I'm pretty sure that everybody's had that added in now. We never expected it to happen. We probably had risks on there for sort of events that were out of our control. This is completely out of your control, but you know, has it now been put in? Are you going to use it to your advantage? How are you going to manage it, etc. So objectives, the requirement of the standard is to set achievable food safety objectives with the means to periodically measure progress, demonstrating continuous improvement. Your objectives need to be consistent with your food safety policy. They need to be measurable. They need to be consistent with applicable food safety requirements, including legal requirements, etc. They need to be monitored and verified. They have to be communicated. They have to be maintained and updated, and they have to be documented. So most companies already have some kind of objectives. It's what most people do, especially if they're also, you know, do sort of like ISO 9001. There's no need to duplicate them. Just make sure that within your company objectives that you include some that are applicable to food safety. I'm not talking about, you know, we want to be the biggest exporter or the best exporter of cakes in Buckinghamshire. I'm talking about things like, you know, typically we get 10 food safety complaints a year of foreign bodies, etc. our target or our objective is to get that down to 0 or get that down to 1. You can measure how many you're getting, you can trend it on it, you can report on it, and hopefully you can achieve it. It's got to be realistic, not, you know, I want to be king of the world, because that's not realistic. So support, this section of the standard includes resources, so that's people, infrastructure and work environment, not just, you know, what machines are you going to use to do something, you know, what people are you going to use, you know, everything around how you're going to resource that process. It includes control of external providers. It includes all providers, not just suppliers. So by that I mean, for example, pest control. So pest control is usually an external provider. How do you control them? Somebody that comes in and does your maintenance for a particular machine, or comes and does, you might outsource tank cleaning or something like that. They're an external provider, so you need to control that provider. How do you control it? How do you, did you contract them to do the work? How do you monitor what they've done? You need to demonstrate your control of that. Competence is included under support, and it's not now measured just by training. It's a bigger picture. So competence is, you know, if you've had training, was the training effective? What are you doing to check the effectiveness, or that the person actually understood it? But also experience is often more valuable than training. So don't just think that competency is measured by have they been trained, because somebody could have, for example, a HACCP level 4 training certificate, they passed the exam, that's really great, but if the HACCP plan is rubbish, are they competent? I don't think so. So you need to look at how you're going to measure that. Communication, the standard provides a framework to depict the communication process within an organisation. You need to be able to demonstrate that you have effective communication internally, externally, with a number of stakeholders, etc., and documented information. So you have to ensure that all documents relating to your food safety management system are identifiable in a suitable format, protected from being changed, or protected from being destroyed, and that they're available to the right people in the right version at the right time. So operation, so this is the biggest clause of ISO 22000. It's where most of your HACCP principles are integrated, and it's your do of your plan, do, check, act. It's broken down into prerequisite programs, traceability. We'll look at those first. So your 2018 version suggests the use of a specific guideline, ISO TS 22002 series, depending on the sector you're working in order to determine your PRPs. I see different references around the world to different prerequisite programs. It might be customer specific that you're following, or a legal requirement that you're following in the country that you're living in. But ISO TS 22002 is a good place to start. So this guideline gives you ideas of the PRPs that you need to implement to be able to manage a number of hazards. Just a note there that you need to monitor and verify your PRPs. or your actions to control your PRPs. Traceability and emergency response. So obviously a traceability system to be able to trace your products from either from origin right the way to the end user, but also your process or your plan of what to do in emergency situations. We could be talking about natural disasters, we could be talking about utility breakdown, or COVID pandemic. But do you have a process in place to follow? So it's not just, you know, all hell breaks loose and you know, a bit of a war room, nobody really knows what to do, who to contact and where to start. So hazard control, going all the way back, so before carrying out your hazard analysis, a team needs to be defined or established, which is usually your first step of HACCP. So you establish your HACCP team, and then it's asking, the standard's asking you to carry out your hazard analysis, and how you and demonstrate how you're going to control those, whether it can be eliminated or it's to an acceptable level. Is it controlled by PRP and OPRP, or is it a CCP? If I'm speaking a different language here to some people, I'm sorry. The control of non-conforming products and processes. All staff need to be held responsible for corrections, and corrective actions must be competent and have the authority to carry out the activities. It's important to be able to demonstrate how you control a process that's not gone completely to plan, or a product that's you know, perhaps the critical limit wasn't achieved. Is it reworked? Is it spoiled? You know, this all has to be documented. What's the process for dealing with that? So also within that section, we're looking at product recall or withdrawal, and how you will notify your interested parties, or the relevant interested parties, for a recall or withdrawal. So performance evaluation, there's three main ways in which performance of your food safety management system is evaluated. Process monitoring, so monitoring what you're doing, having your results of any monitoring that you're carrying out internal audits, and then also your management review. The 22,000-2018 standard has some new points of what need to be considered during your management review meetings. So do check the standard to make sure that these are agenda items in your management review, such as a review of your risks and opportunities, and the effectiveness of any actions taken. The adequacy of your resources, opportunities for continual improvement, and with regard to the outputs of your management review, you must consider the decisions and actions related to continual improvement, and also any need for changes or updates to your food safety management system. So then moving on to improvement, I'm conscious of time. I said 45 minutes, we're nearly there. So you have to have a methodology to capture, manage, resolve any well, a methodology to capture, manage and resolve needs to be undertaken and documented, and you need to be able to demonstrate that. Management of non-conformities, internal non-conformities. It could be a complaint from a supplier, from a customer. It could be non-conforming product. It could be non-conformances raised in internal audits, or also from supplier audits or customer audits if your customers audit you as well. And following on from that, you need to make changes to your food safety management system if required. And if the requirements of ISO 22000 are established, implemented, regularly reviewed and challenged, then continual improvement will occur naturally, organically. So that is it from the standard. You'll be pleased to hear we're nearly at the end, and it appears that my neighbour is having an ASDA delivery. So how can we help you? We try to do regular food safety management system updates and blogs on our website. These go out on our newsletters, but you can always access them on our website. There is a really good implementation guide for ISO 22000 if you're working through it from a brand new point of view, brand new certification. You can go through the implementation guide. There's also a transition checklist which details what the requirement was, what it now is, if it's a new requirement. It kind of allows you to do an internal audit on your own system to see if you're going to be able to meet the requirements of the new standard. And for any consultants out there, we have an associate partner program, APP program, where I hold regular meetings, forums with our consultants to try and help them with anything and share information as much as I can. And so then we have new food safety training courses that we are offering. These are just a few of the training courses that are available. There are extra ones that if you can go to our website, you can, if you can't find what you're looking for here. We also do tailored in-house training courses as well. It's really important to, well, I'm trying to do as many training courses as I can while they're still remote. Don't know about anybody else, but I'm finding it really good to not have to travel everywhere to do things. But yeah, at the moment things are being done remotely still, but we're slowly getting back to being on site or in training centres. So please do have a look at our training courses. And I have a couple of questions, so let's have a look. Yeah, the gentleman that's asked, do we offer ISO 22000 lead auditor course? Yes, we do. The 5-day course and also a 3-day course if you're already, the person's already approved for another ISO standard. Another question with regards to emergency response procedure, does it have to be documented? You have to have a procedure that sets out the framework as how you will deal with emergencies. That will incorporate, you know, who should be contacted, who should be gathered together to discuss it, what you're going to do about it. You know, you'll have some examples. So if it's for some reason you can't operate, you know, what does that mean? Are you going to have products that's going to be going out of date, or is it that you can't, you know, you don't have enough staff in to be able to process, you're going to have to work at reduced capacity? So you're going to have an emergency response procedure, and that will be documented. You will then need to keep a log or minutes or document in some way what you do when an emergency happens, how you actually respond, because for one, to be able to demonstrate that you meet the requirements of the standard and that you've followed your own procedure, but also to look back and see, okay, what could we have done differently? If something like this happens again, what do we need to do differently? What did we do that was really good? What did we learn from? So I hope that answers that question. And I think that's it. So if anyone's got any other questions, feel free to contact me directly or email back when we send out the webinar recording. Love questions, it's how we all learn. And what I'll do is I will also try and collate any questions that I get between now and the next webinar, which I think we're going to do in December. So in December, I'm going to do a webinar about ISO 22000 transition, what to do if you haven't transitioned. So, I'm going to set out a framework. If you've not transitioned, what are your options? Where do you go from here? So thank you all for your time. I hope that you've enjoyed the webinar today. Please keep in contact and we'll speak to you soon.